Hello, Faye Babes. I'm Aubrey.
And I'm Paiton.
And today we are reviewing the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series: Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire.
Yes, so George the cup of coffee as we dive between these paper sheets. All right, everyone, welcome to this episode. This has been a long time coming. Quite literally, I just finished reading those 4 books in the midst of reading everything else. I started reading Throne of Glass probably last November.
Yeah.
So it's been about like a book a month. So just a little lowdown if this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast. We have a non-spoiler section and then we have a spoiler section.
Yes.
We also call it our NS section if you are really into the hardcover podcast. But regardless, we're going to keep this non-spoiler section really short because we have so many books to get through. So it's like rapid fire this episode because we got to get through all of this content. And they all lead into one another. So
Yeah.
we're going to give our initial thoughts, general feelings going to these books. Like, I don't know if I said this already. Aubrey read the whole series. So I know that this episode, I'm going to be the one talking more because we do not need any spoilers.
No.
So I will probably guide that conversation. Yes. So if you are at the same place I am, welcome. If you're just coming for a nice little recap, welcome again. So yeah, Aubrey's going to start us off with a brief overview where you start at the first book of the series.
Yes. And if you don't know, this whole series together is like 8, 9-ish books long, depending on what all you're counting, I think. But the first 3 books kind of ease you in and almost feel like they were plotted as a trilogy, and then the plot gets expanded a lot with the next set. So I think that when Paiton got to this part, I was like, no, we can review these 3 books as a whole, and it's a really good breaking point without us doing a video for each book. Okay, so starting with book 1, Throne of Glass, we meet Celaena, and she is a prisoner in the salt mines called Endover. And I think at first you don't really know why she was sent to these slave camps. But along comes 2 handsome men in their 20s that take her out from this really like horrible, harsh salt mines and bring her to the castle, the glass castle of Ardalan. And there you learn that one of those handsome strangers is the prince and the other is the captain of the guard. And the prince has chosen Celaena to be his champion of sorts to compete in a competition to become the king's assassin, because Celaena already had this big history of being this great assassin before she was taken to the salt mines and like a kind of like fantasy arrested. It's like a fantasy jail, except everyone dies at the mines. But so basically the plot of this first book is watching her compete in this competition against other like skeevy, morally gray characters that nobles have positioned in. So anyways, that is the plot of the first book, but then you will watch Celaena kind of grow in this world. If you've heard, there's a popular TikTok sound of like, in a land without magic, the assassin must face off against competitors and whatever. And you kind of just watch her journey, and it follows, I think the general structure of the series follows a typical like epic fantasy where we're kind of starting small with this like assassin competition, but we're gonna grow to a big like save the world type plot.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because after reading all of the books, you start like looking back at the first book, the series changes so much. And I already know that it's gonna shift so much more than that. So let me look here. So expectations, and I'm sure if you can remember them, Aubrey, feel free to chime in as the sun starts creeping in to my space. Okay, so my expectations going in,
Yeah.
I know Sarah J. Maas very well. I read all
Mhm.
of the ACOTAR series first, and then I read all of Crescent City, basically, because the third one came
Yeah.
out in January. And I've already read Crown of Midnight and Throne of Glass. So I think why most people read Throne of Glass last, if you haven't like started with those books, is because they're very much marketed as YA.
Yeah.
And I think that people who read ACOTAR and Crescent
Mm.
City are people who really want spice in their books.
That's true.
And that's just
Mhm.
something that I knew going in wasn't going to be there. But with that being said, I'm finding a lot about myself as a reader that I just love tension. And
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily the actual spice that gets me really excited to read these romantasy books. Not that I would categorize this is a YA fantasy. That's
Yeah.
through and through.
Mhm.
So I think that I like the elements, but Selena is just such a badass character that like you
Yeah.
just have to respect it. So I was like unsure. I knew that it's daunting with the
It's a
amount of
lot.
books that is in this
Mhm.
series. You're like, wow, am I really gonna commit? And you get FOMO, and so you just do.
Yeah.
So those were kind of my expectations going in, that I knew it wasn't going to be ACOTAR, and I had to be okay with that.
I think for me, I had read the ACOTAR trilogy. I don't think I had read Silver Flames yet when I first started it. And for the biggest thing that I had was I couldn't connect to the writing at first. If you didn't know, Sarah started these books when she was 16. Now, they didn't get published till she was 26, because I feel like that's a big misconception that people are like, she wrote these books when she was 16. And the idea started brewing at 16. Like, definitely all credit to where credit's due. I think that especially in these first initial books, the first two, the writing feels a little
Young.
feels young, feels a little
Yeah.
naive. I
Yeah,
also
definitely.
felt like when I was reading that they kept mentioning all of this stuff that was just kind of thrown in there and didn't connect to anything and didn't have meaning, and I thought it was honestly sloppy world building. I didn't
Yeah.
get it all. I feel like I think it could have been done better. However, I will say when you get to the later books, you start realizing how much of the groundwork Sarah really was laying.
Yeah.
And that world building details that you thought was throwaway or unimportant really did matter in the grand scheme of things. So either she had it planned from the beginning, or she did a great job going back and filling in
Covering.
all of the plot holes. And I don't care. I think either thing is a talent. So
Yeah. And we're not going to talk about it really in this, because I just don't feel like it really needs it. But there's a reason why I feel like Assassin's Blade was the book it was. Because
yes.
I feel like she needed to make up and clarify some things, because we just like skirted on by them. And so that's why I think it's really important that she did that.
Yeah, I actually, right before I read Throne of Glass, I read Way of Kings, the Brandon Sanderson book, which, if any of you guys know, is like a mammoth of a book series and like the epicest of epic fantasies. And it's literally so insane and so adult and so hard to understand that going from that to Throne of Glass gave me such serious whiplash that I finished the book, and then another thing happened at the end of the book that we'll talk about once we get to our spoiler section. And I said, I'm putting this series down. I'm putting it down. I'm not returning to it for a bit. I need a break. And so when I eventually did return, I did probably the least recommended method, and I read Assassin's Blade second. For you guys who don't know, Assassin's Blade is the prequel from Throne of Glass. And in publishing order, it came out after Heir of Fire. But people will say to read it first. People will say to read it, well, I read it second. I don't think people say to read it second. People say to read it third, fourth, anywhere between like book 1 and 3. You can't really go wrong with reading it. And I don't think it will change your reading experience, but I don't think any of them are bad. When did you read Assassins?
No. I read Assassin's Blade third.
Third.
I just felt like Crown of Midnight, if you know the ending of Crown of Midnight, I just think that was the perfect, like, it just wrapped it in. Assassin's Blade put me in the biggest book slump ever. But regardless, I read that third, and I really do think that's the best way to read it. But I know people always say read it first or third. You're just gonna have some things spoiled for you if you read it first. And I knew the spoilers just because no one spoiled it for me, because I was just like, this makes sense. Like you said, like the sloppy world building, like you kind of just, you're like, okay, you know, if you read enough fantasy, you can call that shit out. But my cousin Lane read it after Heir of Fire, so he read it in publication order, which to me seems horrible. But
well, I will say Paiton has not read, for anyone else here who's finished the series already, Paiton has finished Heir of Fire. She has not read Crown of Midnight, and a lot of things from Assassin's Blade.
Oh, I did read Crown of Midnight. I haven't read
Queen of Shadows. You haven't read Queen of Shadows. Yeah. Sorry, I get the two confused all the time. Like just in
yeah, they're quick.
But Queen of Shadows will draw back a lot of things that happen in Assassin's Blade, which is kind of why Sarah, as writing it, was like, hold on, y'all need to know some shit to write it. But I think any order works. Just pick whatever you need. And honestly, I would say if you're reading the first 3 books and you're struggling, read it wherever you think you're like struggling the most.
Yes.
When you need it, because the writing style is elevated so much more with this. By that point, Sarah has written more books under her belt. I think she even started ACOTAR by the time that she was writing Assassin's Blade. So it just feels a little bit more lifted in its prose and world building and everything, honestly.
And you do see that. The book is basically short stories, and the way they're broken up, my peanut-sized brain was like, oh, now we're on to something else. Why are we in the middle of the desert? We were like, this does not make sense. So anyways, star ratings for I'll do all 4.
I don't even know
solid
what I did.
For all 4 of these. I'm going to group them together.
Okay.
Crown of Midnight was my favorite out of all of them. On Goodreads, when I did not put them all together, I gave Crown of Midnight a 4.
Yeah.
I gave Heir of Fire 3.5.
Okay.
I don't understand why that, other than the love interest, I could not stand this book. It was horrible to get through. So Crown of Midnight was my favorite. I would give this like a 3.5 so far.
Yeah.
3.5. Because I just feel like I'm going to hit like a solid 4.5, maybe 5 stars with the whole series. I'm not going to say 4 stars. No, this is a 3.5. Like, let's be real here. It was hard to get through, and it's April, and I started in November, and I read all the ACOTAR books in like a month. So
no, I agree. Cutting it here and not getting any of the payoff that the later books give, absolutely. This is a 3.5. I don't remember what I rated each book individually, and it was my old Goodreads, but I think they probably sat around there. Throne of Glass might have been 3 just because of how much I personally struggled with it. I also am a Dorian girly till I die, and we'll get more into that in the spoiler section. And I think that really shaped my reading perspective.
Okay. Opposite here. Okay, so with that being said, we are entering our spoiler section.
Yes.
I love being the naive one because you get like my raw reaction. So stick around for the spoilers. We are starting, like I said, we're not going over Assassin's Blade, but we may refer back to it. So we may refer to Assassin's Blade. So I do want to say spoilers for Assassin's Blade as well. If you're going in publication order, I feel like there's just some things we're gonna have to mention, especially love interests and that all. So anyways, we're gonna start. Yeah, exactly. There's not that much spoilers.
Doing spoilers for the whole 3 books with this, or are we gonna try to stick to just the Throne of Glass while we're talking about Throne of Glass?
The way I did my script, and the way I'm gonna try to talk, I'm gonna try my best to keep it to just the book.
Keep it locked up. Got it.
So we're going to keep it locked up, and maybe we'll do timestamps or something. But with that being said, I feel like we're going to market this video as the first kind of like installment of the series. So
exactly.
Also, whatever. We need to get to Crown of Midnight, and it all crumbles from there. So Throne of Glass. We've kind of been shitting on it. It's a great book. It's just a lot. So
I have the
I
old
do.
covers.
I got the fairy loot ones, and so I
They're
have the
very
new ones.
pretty.
I have the new ones behind me that they look like they're books, but there's actually no books in them. Okay, so I do think for a 16-year-old who conceptualize these ideas that Throne of Glass can be very poetic and very sweet, but there's two things here. The world building is not good. But though if I was a 16-year-old reading these books,
yeah,
I'm trying to put myself in the YA space and not trying to compare what beautiful prose I've seen Sarah give in other series and other books. So at the time and place this was written, I can't do this. I couldn't do that. So I want to say that this is, and I think I put down on the script, so well written for its time. I can agree with that. Definitely not spicy.
No,
but
no
there
spice
is tension. There's so much tension.
Yeah, it definitely has like the YA slow burn. And I like that in these books. I know we're still at the first one, but she kind of switches up the love interest a bit as you continue through the series, and I think that kind of helps bring in that slow burn, and you don't really need the spice at all, because you're still getting that relationship.
I will say there's like there's always like a revolving door of men, and I'm gonna get into this eventually, but there is a love triangle in this book.
Yes.
So Selena gets pulled from the salt mines, and I remember one scene. Was it Dorian who came to the salt mines to like? He was like, "I want her," and like grabbed her and took her back, or was it Kale?
I forget. Honestly, in the first chapter, I don't think she knows, and so
the first chapter of this book sucks. But anyways, I don't know who it is, because honestly, like she was falling in love. She was not falling in love, but she was having feelings for these Kale, who's like the king's guard, like, number one, and Dorian, who's the king's son.
Yeah.
So he's the prince and like the head guard basically, and they're best friends, and they grew up together. So I don't know who it was, and I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments because they always do. I just remember being giddy when I figured out that who the love interest was in that scene, when he's like, I don't know. Sometimes when you look back at scenes where you're like, oh, that's when they first met, and like, I don't know. It's just giddy when you think back to it. So yes, they both like have big crushes on Selena.
Absolutely.
Selena's like, okay, boys, and then she's like set on being the king's champion. So this whole book, as Aubrey said, is very Hunger Games-esque, trying to prove yourself, trying to be the best. It's very powerless, 100%. It literally is.
Well, and
literally, because there's a love triangle in Powerless too. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think Selena in this book is really relishing her freedom because she was a slave before this, and even her past before that wasn't the best. And so I think one of my favorite things about this book and series in general is just Selena and her character. I think Sarah J. Maas is a queen of characters. I say that all the time. But Selena is this teenage girl, and she is, she wants to flirt with the cute boys, and she loves chocolates and cakes and music, and she's trying really hard to compete at this like competition thing with some people who are like way older than her. And I think she just is what grounds this book for me, because I do not like the prose in this book, is her character and like watching her interact, and she's learning things like there's no magic in this land, but there used to be magic, and she's finding these like hidden passages in the castle, and it's very like reminiscent aesthetic. I think it will make such a great movie. Like if they ever adapted these, like I can see it so well in my mind, and that's full credit to Sarah J. Maas about that.
it's literally giving like Harry, Hermione, and Ron finding
Yeah.
secret passageways in Hogwarts. Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy. But 100%, and we've said this in every Sarah J. Maas video, that her books are her books, and she is the author she is because of her characters.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
fact that from day one, the first book she ever has written shows that.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a natural talent, baby. I don't know what else to say. But when reading Throne of Glass, in my head, I was like, oh, Dorian is the male, the main love interest. Like, they are together most of the time. He's seen, and I'm just going to give my perspective, he's seen in Throne of Glass as this, like, brooding, tough, but also, like, privileged character. Cale, I thought, was an old man to begin with. I didn't even know he was their age. Like,
That's so funny.
When I start getting tricklings of Cale having feelings for Selena, I'm like, ew. And I'm like,
Ew.
wait. And then I had to look it up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this a love triangle? Because I went into Throne of Glass, and I'm still going to Throne of Glass knowing nothing because I want to enjoy myself.
Wild that you avoided spoilers. I went in knowing
TikTok, I'm like,
everything.
Well, I think I know how the series ends. But, like, I don't fully know how the series ends because of fucking TikTok. But anyways.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, totally. I'm Team Dorian Havillard in this book.
Oh, my gosh. Dorian is just, it's exactly how I want, like, the dark-haired, brooding prince guy to act. And I think his character definitely grows throughout the series. Yeah, so at the end of this book, if you guys got to it, one, at the end of the competition, there was some weird ass magic shit. And like weird ass magic shit that like I couldn't comprehend then, and knowing everything I can't comprehend now. Like,
oh my god.
Ghosts, people, spirit worlds were showing up. How do you say her name? Nehemia?
Nehemia.
I don't know how. Yeah. All of these, you know what?
Nehemia. That's how I say it.
She's
They'll
doing
let you know.
like magic, like runic shit, I think, to help protect Selena. Like the queen shows up as like a vision, I think. I don't know. It was so
it's like a fever dream.
It literally is a fever dream, and I cannot explain to you what was going on there. And I think that's part of like the weaker beginning styles, is that she wanted to execute something that was just so high up, and like the amount of magic in these books, obviously it's a land without magic, starts with like absolutely nothing throughout 90% of this book. And so the quick flip to all of this shit happening in this battle scene where like Selena is also dying, it was a lot to understand. But then, the very end of the book, the thing that pissed me off, and I put the book down and I said, I'm not coming back to it right now, is Selena has two options, right? Okay, she is frat boy Cale, cool, whatever. And she has charming, witty, brooding Dorian Prince. And Dorian, for one, is head over heels in love with her. She looks Dorian in the eye and she's like, yeah, I want to focus on my freedom. Like, I haven't been in, free for so long. I don't want to be in a relationship. Valid. But then that bitch turns around, looks at Cale and says, but it's not off the table for you. What? What? We're going to turn and look at Cale and be like, no, I'll date you though.
That's what I mean. Like, that is her, though. Like, her character is just like, I'm gonna do what I want. And so, like,
for sure,
Sarah,
she made a bad choice.
Sarah loves writing these characters.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, at least in every book, I can think of one character she's written that's like, why? And, like, this is the, like, Nesta energy. Like, this is the canon, like, Nesta energy that, like, she's like, hold off, I'm actually gonna put that in another character one day. So anyways, yeah, so I'm Team Dorian at the end of Throne of Glass. But I go and jump right into my favorite of the three that we're talking about right now, and that is Crown of Midnight.
Dude, I couldn't stand this shit.
I enjoyed Crown of Midnight the best because the ending is crazy. Okay, so I will say, Aubrey, this is hard. I'm not into the love interest in this book. I'm into the love interest in this book, Heir of Fire, but
Yeah.
I'm into the plot line in this book.
The
The plot line starts
The plot starts plotting.
It starts plotting because there was no plot. There was no plot in Throne of Glass. It was just
there was the competition. We were slowly working our way through, but yeah.
There's more establishing.
There's much more in this guy.
So a bit happens. Real quick, let's talk about the love interest. I'm not into Kale. I've never have been.
No.
I think he's a sweet guy. I just think there's another lady out there. And I knew this the whole time. Like even like when they were like smashing or cuddling or whatever, like I'm like this isn't gonna last. I think I appreciate his protectiveness, and this character reminds me of that friend, that best guy friend in high school that is always in love with you, but you're not. This is just fun. Like you can have your crush, but just know at the end of the day, I'm choosing that guy. Like, so that's how I felt, and I was hoping that. I've heard some other names that weren't introduced at this point, so I'm like, I know other characters out there. But yeah, also Dorian really becomes a side character.
Yeah.
In this book,
yeah, Dorian
which
gets
I was not expecting.
Pushed to the side with Selena's attentions as they switch. I think honestly what pisses me off the most is one, I think Kale is just like a little frat boy. Like I literally think that all of his energy, it's just like such like basic man. That he bothered me the entire time. And never mind, because what I was going to say is actually kind of a bit of a spoiler, so I won't say it till later. But I didn't like him training her. I felt like her like going on runs with him and stuff during like the days. It just gave me the ick. I honestly never liked him, and this was his book. And even reading like the cute scenes, like there's a scene in this where they're at a ball and they're supposed to be guarding and like they dance and Dorian's like looking on from afar. I don't feel 1 ounce of butterflies for Cool in that moment. I'm not about it. I'm like, why did you make the wrong decision? He's not for you.
He should just be the best friend. He can be the best friend that always will have a crush on her, but inevitably will fall in love with someone else, and we all can be happy. Like, damn. Like I could not. So yeah, Dorian.
I will say, I think a lot of people do love him. Like, I do think we are in the minority, and people who are reading this.
I'm not a hater.
Like, I am, but I think a lot of people were like so happy for the switch, wanted her with him. Just couldn't be me.
Yeah, I know that there's some other things later in the series, and we can talk about that when it's time. For me, I feel like, okay, let this guy shine for a little bit. I don't hate him. I see him as just how he was raised. He's a guard. He wants to protect her. Obviously, he has feelings for her. They're somewhat reciprocated on Selena's end. So I don't necessarily see him as like total frat boy. I just see him as like a dude who is like trained to do one thing, and
she was
like
just the dick she had to ride.
Yeah, like he just was kind. He cared about her, and like all the way through the end of Heir of Fire, like you see that, but he's never been the guy that like could take the stand and like actually fight against the powers. You know what I mean? Like he's always kind of hid behind his title, but I do think like we get a lot of look and glimpse into his childhood, and I just think there's a reason for that. So
yeah. Well, and in this, you're kind of in this book, it's starting to reveal more about the like politics of the world that's going on. And so you know from the first book that Ardalan has like kind of been conquering lands and taking over things, and that the king is a real like skeevy character. And in this you kind of learn more about Selena and her talking about like her homeland. There's a whole scene where it's like the anniversary of when Terrasen was conquered, and she kind of takes the day to herself. And this is where Kale starts to process maybe the king he serves isn't the best person. But the root of the issue is that I think he's one of, it's such a realistic character, but it's this idea of holding on to tradition rather than like someone showing you, hey, this is wrong, and you're like, I'd rather have what feels safe, what I've had forever, this tradition, than accept into it. And I think that gets brought up to the light when Nehemia is murdered, because that is when Kale chooses the king over Selena.
And Selena is like, I know, I almost said it earlier too. And Selena is like, no, like we start getting the, because at this point we don't know exactly what happened in Terrasen, and obvious, like we don't know her role in all of that. We just know that she's from this land. But like the murder of Nehemia, and that was her best friend and her confidant and someone she really trusted and loved equally to Kale at this point. Like you totally see that divide of like, this doesn't affect you, like what are you talking about? And then at this point we know about where Nehemia's from. There's slaves there, and she's trying to free them, and she's trying to play this game with Selena. So that's kind of the backstory there. But Nehemia's murder sets Selena off. Like this, I think, is the because it's just that rooted trauma that got brought up, and it's like another person so special to her. Like the way that it was described, the way that she was murdered, like as much as I can see this as a, when I was reading this, I'm like, oh my god, this makes such a good movie series. I do not want to see what that scene will look like.
No, that's like Game of Thrones level. Gruesome.
Okay.
Well, and I love how she reacts to the situation. Obviously, it's a horrible situation, and I think there's a lot of valid critiques about Nehemia's death as one of the very few people of color in this series. There is like extra ties to it that Sarah has brought in that gets revealed later, but I think especially at this point, like, it feels rough, and I don't want to linger on that because that's not Paiton and I's platform to speak on. I think other people belong there, but her immediately trying to kill him, like she's like, I am slashing my sword and it would have hit if Dorian didn't pop out with his magic. Like Dorian's like side character this entire time, and then he's showing up with magic to stop the killing blow. Honestly, I think the series might have been better if she killed him. I think we could have still gotten her on the boat at the end.
Yes.
But
it would have been fine. Oh my gosh, like of course Dorian shows up, and then at this point you're like, oh, now you're like, if you were reading as like a very gullible teenager, you're like, now we love Dorian. Like you're supposed to give in to like the plot. I just think we're so hardened where we're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, teenage me would have been flipping back and fucking forth.
Of course. Yeah. So, totally, 100%. So we find out that Dorian has magic this whole time, and I do not know how the king does. Like, I don't know if this comes up later. The king's always known, but literally in Selena's room, there's access like behind like a tapestry into the underground of like underneath the castle, where we find out about ward marks. And we meet Dort, the whatever.
Oh, the little knocker guy.
And he's so witty and funny. And who's buried there? The queen?
Yeah, it's either she's buried there or her husband is.
I think because that's where we find a sword. And regardless,
Yeah.
you read the book, you know. Anyways, so Selena's like messing around down there, and a portal opens eventually because she like studies these ward marks. She was studying them with Nemia. That gets wrapped up later.
Yeah.
As to why they also were able to speak languages that no one knew, because you find out why eventually. But I just want to like throw in here for the purpose of plot and bringing it up to speed.
Yeah.
You find out through this portal, crazy shit, that Selena is Fae. She's Fae. She has some type of power. I almost said it. I mixed those two words together. She has power. And Kale's like face, when like her ears get really pointy, he's just like,
he
does not know what to do.
Starts Kale's villain arc, honestly. But he does go in for Fleetfoot, which I did put on our script here, that I am obsessed with this dog. Like, you guys don't even know. Like, if you bring in like a cat or a dog into the script, immediately best character. I'm a sidekick, like animal lover every day. Anyways, so I'm obsessed, and I will be naming my next dog Fleetfoot because, like, it'd be so little
cool.
golden
Like,
retriever.
Fleet. Yeah, like Fleet, come here, and his name's Fleetfoot.
It's
like,
so
oh
cute.
That's so cute. So he does go in and rescue the dog, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, I wasn't worried about him getting sucked into a portal. I was worried about the dog not being able to come back. I did not give two shits what happened to him. I was like, but please save Fleetfoot.
And save the dog.
You have to save the dog.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
So yes, that's
honestly, I will say about I feel like a lot of people got shocked when he has this like very harsh reaction against finding out that Selena is Fae. But I think if you like earlier in the book, when she starts doing her like little assassin missions for the king, which you find out she's like not actually doing but like kind of doing, he gets so mad at her for killing people, and it's like become a little bit of a butt of a joke on TikTok, like, because why, like, you knew she was an assassin, and then especially the scene where he gets kidnapped by like the underground like rebellion, and she goes and saves him and like slaughters so many fucking people
because she's badass.
I think at that point he like, and I think part of the reason he doesn't like the fact that she's Fae is seriously just his ego. I think at that point he's like, is she better than me?
Yeah, because he's like really talented.
Is she more powerful than me? And I think that really just destroys his character at the moment. I never liked him, but I think people who did like him were like,
it's like,
ugh, like, she's so cool. And I think that the fact that Selena's animal form is a human is like
well, so I was confused with that for a while. It took me till Heir of Fire, because like there's some characters that like they transform into animals. And Terraton's symbol is the like deer.
Oh, right? The white stag.
Yeah, so I thought like that's what she was gonna transform into. No, she just looks a little different, but she's still a human with like crazy powers. Like, that is it. But like it took me till Heir of Fire, and I'm like, wait, what the fuck does she turn into?
Yeah,
literally nothing. She's just Fae. Like, it's more just like Akatar then.
And finally, at the very end, Selena gives Kale the clue he needs to figure out.
I wish she would have given it to Dorian. That would have been cooler. Anyways.
Yeah. Selena is Aelin.
Yes.
And so if you have seen TikToks about the End of Glass and you keep seeing this Aelin character and you were like, she's not in the books,
it's Selena, which I knew the whole time. I just didn't have it in writing to confirm it. And that is why
oh my God,
I think Crown of Midnight was my favorite, because the ending was just so good. Like the last couple of chapters, I was like, shit.
Lying to you about who Selena was so hard for me internally because
I even told you in the car that one night. I was
know.
like,
I went into the series knowing that Selena was Aelin. Like, I knew that from TikTok spoilers from the get-go. But Paiton didn't. And so I'm literally like, listen, like after at Heir of Fire, a bunch of new characters get introduced, which I think was really smart of me. I was like, a bunch of new characters get introduced, including like Manon, which is probably someone she had heard of before. So I was like, Aelin is just another one of those characters. I was like, there's Lysandra, Manon, Adolin, however you say his name. And Aelin, I was like, they're all just new. Rowan, like they're all just new characters that come later in the series.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so they mentioned Aelin in Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight.
Yeah, in Crown of Midnight, because
they talk about Aelin and
Archer
this, like, lost princess.
Yeah, tells her it's like Aelin's gathering forces, and Selena's like, no, she's not.
And that's like kind of supposed to be your like clue as the reader.
Yeah,
I knew going in, I was like, Aelin is the main character of the series. How are they gonna make Selena not a main character anymore? So like, it just made sense. It'd be different if I was reading it for the first time.
Yeah,
as they were published.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Spoiler
was probably
free.
such a wild experience reading these as they were published.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I totally knew. I loved the ending as she's like sailing off and like he finds out and it's like, shit, like this is amazing. So that's the end of Crown of Midnight. Mm-hmm. I know we missed a lot. I know, but I wanted to talk about what I want to talk about.
Oh my God,
this is my podcast.
So much in here for Heir of Fire.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
God, really
yes. Yeah, we honestly,
we'll zoom through these.
We're not the best people to get like a full recap. Like I think the girl who does the deep dives with like the board and like explains the whole plot. Like if you want a plot recap, go to her. If you want shits and giggles, come to us.
Yeah, exactly. We're just here to gossip. So Heir of Fire, I think this is a whole lot of book. It is. Yes. Like it took me a long time to read. So Heir of Fire is split into 2 parts. First part, hated. Second part, amazing.
Yeah.
My cousin and I read this around the same time, so I was able to like gnaw off his ear about what I thought. And I agree. He finished it before me. He goes, the second part is where it gets really good. And
yeah,
literally the first chapter into the second part, you're like, yep, this is a good book.
Yeah.
But it took me forever to get through. So Aelin is now in Wendelin. And the issue with this book is that there are too many POVs. And if you know me, if you know your girl, I cannot, like, I get so bored with multiple POVs because I can tell you one thing. The only thing I care about favorites. You pick favorites. The only thing I cared about this whole book was Aelin and Rowan, okay?
Yeah.
I did not care about anyone else. I knew Manon was going to be a character I really loved in the future, just not now.
Yeah.
And I will say that Sarah did introduce this character so well because she did not overpower any plot lines. She's in the back the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of get that origin story in the back, and that is going to lead to an interaction, and I already see where that's going, and I love it. Did not give a shit about Kale. Did not give a shit about Dorian. I did not care about them anymore. They're gone. This gorgeous man that transformed into a hawk is in front of me, and he's mean to her.
And he's mean.
But Aelin is such a bitch. Like, she needed someone who was gonna be mean to her. And so, oh my God, the quotes I pulled from this book, I was like, this is Rowan. I didn't know who Rowan was, but the minute I met him, I was like, okay, he better not be old. I mean, of course he's ancient because Fae, but I was like, he better not be old because he is so attractive. Like, the way he talks and the way he's so mean and like brooding and like but sexy at the same time, it gives me really good vibes. So
yeah,
I'm obsessed with Rowan. Like,
Dude,
obsessed.
I liked him. I was never obsessed with him, but you know what kind of ruined it for me is the fan art. I don't think I've seen any fan art of him that I'm like, that's hot. And it's just not my type, and I think it much more is your type. Because
Fan art, like, silver hair.
Silver hair. Usually he has like half of like a buzz cut over here, and he's got like tattoos like down the one side of his face. And I just don't. I don't find anything about him attractive. It's like so weird. Like I love his personality.
I know, he is so hot, and I usually don't go for blondes.
Well, I think it's silver.
Yeah, I do see it silver, and then sometimes, yeah, that does make a difference.
Yeah, and then like,
and he has this like pack of friends that are assholes too.
My issue is a lot of people describe him as looking like Geralt from The Witcher, and he's not. He is not that big. Like, I swear to God, the Fae are a little lanky. Like, I know he has muscles and stuff, but he is not as, like, big and, like, I just don't think,
this is my thing. Take the tattoos away from his face and make his hair black, and that is Dorian. Like, take the tattoos away, put black hair on him, and that is Dorian. This is my issue with fan art. I'm sorry, take the tattoos away, put a tattoo in his arm, and make his hair black. It's Reese. Like,
this is my favorite. The girl who does these.
That's nice.
I use her shit for our thumbnails all the time. I love her art. Here's of like a bunch of the characters. I'm obsessed. Yep. I love her shit. I'll tag her in the comments or something because I can't think of her name right now.
But that's what I mean, Aubrey. Like, fan art that's not like the same thing. Like, it's important. Yeah. So I fell in love. I didn't know what he really looked like. I know they mentioned silver hair and tattoos, which I'm not really into tattoos, but like I'm fine with that. He's a hawk, which is cool because I feel like they're always like a wolf or like something like that. I love his character is like a fucking bird. Like, I don't know. I just think it's cool that it's different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I was thinking that Maeve was going to be.
I don't know either.
Like Aylin's new mommy, but this was not the case. This woman sucks. I did not like her in this book. We will see where she goes after that. But
it did let Aylin have, honestly, like, it was too hard of a line to be in book 3, I feel like. But when she gets to the castle and she is trying to blackmail, like, I don't even know, like, threaten Maeve into turning Rowan over to her, and she lights the whole fucking city on fire, and she's like, your city will burn, and Maeve's like, it's made of stone, and Aylin's like, your people aren't. That's too good of a line, and that's too strong of this character for book 3, but I don't fucking care because it slaps.
Yes. Oh no, I loved it. So Aylin unleashing her power, like I do love the whole like outside of like that little castle cottage thing that they all kind of live in. I love that, and the characters, they're like are they called demi-fae in this book or half-fae?
I think it's demi.
Okay. Basically, they're demi-fae. They're like mixed. Their bloodlines are. Anyway, so I love how those characters guide her, and even to the fact, oh my god, there's this one scene I just remembered when Rowan, like, Aylin is so beaten down, so dead. Yeah. And Rowan, Aylin was so mean to them. She was like, I don't give a shit about the people, and like walks out. In Aylin fashion, she's like self-destructive. Maybe it's because of her childhood. I don't know. But Rowan walks in and they look him square in the face and they're like, "What are you doing to this girl?"
Yeah,
and I'm like,
"This is a you problem."
Yes, like, what are you doing to this girl? Because I don't think enough men take accountability for their actions. And like, yes, I do agree that to a certain extent she needed to be pushed. But, like, for Rowan to get set, like, what are you doing to this woman? We know who she is. You don't have to dance around the fact that is Aylin. And then they talk about how her mother was there, you know, once before, and like I know those eyes, and like, oh my god, I love that part. But anyways, a huge thing, and we find out that word gets back to the king, Dorian's daddy, that
Dorian's daddy,
basically
King of Ireland.
conquered his like one of his most powerful sort of creations that he created using magic. So that's a huge step that we see her firepower, which I don't know if we talked about thus far.
No, I don't think we have yet.
Has fire, and I almost said it earlier in the episode. I was like,
yeah.
So she has fire heart. She is so much.
Well,
she burns, and it's cute because Rowan is ice and wind. So together they balance each other.
They balance each other. Well, and I feel like her being like Fireheart is like such a strong part of her character, especially in the later books, that like it just like perfectly like matches her personality.
Yes, it does. And so with Rowan too, like she'll light a forest on fire and like he fixes it. Like it is so sexy, so hot, so amazing. I'm obsessed with it. So yeah, I know we talked about her lighting shit on fire, but just so we're clear here. And then it brings the ability to be like, you're gonna burn out. Like a lot of times in fantasy books, you talk about using up all your magic. So this was crazy. But back to where she is going to burn all of Maeve's people down. She gets this is so sexy too. This book at the end was hot and heavy and horny. So at the end,
it's the YA, guys.
She breaks. Yeah, it's the YA, but like
the tension.
The tension. So she breaks the blood oath between Maeve and Rowan. And so the issue and the amazing issue here is that she does a blood oath with Rowan, but the sexy part is that Rowan takes this so seriously, and Aelin is like so unserious about it. Aelin's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "My queen," or whatever, and like sucks her blood, and she's just like, "Okay," and like, I don't care what you do, like, congrats. Like, you're
like
welcome.
she was kind of just doing it to protect him, and he was like, "No, we're doing this." Like,
and she was like,
"Dude, what are you? I am loyal to you and only you." Like, he pulls out like high fantasy shit, and Selena, Aelin, I can say Aelin now. Aelin is like, I was just kind of living in this like magic-ish world. Like, we're not really. We're not really like that here.
Gets down to his knee, which you would never see Rowan do, especially to her. And this whole book, may I add, they're like sharing a bed. She like tattoos him. Like it's so hot, but like nothing ever happens, and that's the hot part.
Well, and Rowan is mourning the loss of his mate. So in this world, if you've read Romantasy before, like mates are like this big thing. And Rowan had a mate like 300 years ago because he's old as fuck, who died, I think, carrying his child. Is that, that?
Yep, she was pregnant.
Yeah. And so it's just like this really like horrible situation, and like I feel like that kind of then for Rowan and Aelin, as much as they're feeling drawn to one another, they're like, it's a wall between them. And Aelin also is like not in the headspace for a relationship. Like when she broke up with Dorian, she really should have just stuck to her guns on that and never dated. Cool. But like she definitely is like, I need to grow my power. I need to go, like, I need to figure out what the fuck I'm doing when I return to Ardalan. Like, I can no longer keep hiding. I need to start getting my shit together and like here for Terrasen. So it adds
Rowan kind of gets in the way, though. That one scene where he like scoops her up and like takes care of her, and there's this one quote. I mean, we don't even have to talk about it to whatever end, because like, can we get that tattooed on my body? Like, I'm ready for the tattoo. I'm ready for the tattoo. Anyway, so he says something like she's staying in his room, and they're like, it's going between the line, like there's a kiss on the forehead halfway through, and you're like, oh shit, like that was really cute, but then he's an asshole to her like the next, you're like unsure. But he looks at her like it's really late at night and these people don't sleep apparently. Like Aelin does not sleep. She's like, I gotta wake up at dawn, and it's like, 3 a.m. or whatever. And he looks at her late at night and he's like, I know you don't know what this is and I don't even know what this is, but we're just going to try our best. And I was like, dude, that's so real and relatable. Like in a relationship, that's like, you don't know what you're doing. I'm trying my best. Let's just all try our best.
Yeah.
I forget what it is. I definitely highlighted it. But to the point from that point to when he's sucking her blood, and
Sucking
at that
her
point,
blood.
this whole book, and I made note in my head of this, is that this whole book, it's told from third perspective.
Yes.
Aelin is only referenced as Selena until the end, where Selena says, I'm Aelin, blah, blah, blah. And now it's that full crossover, because the whole book, Rowan calls her Aelin. Everyone calls her Aelin except for the people back in Adarlan, or however you say it.
But like, she's still thinking of herself as Selena.
But from this point at the end of Heir of Fire, where we're at is, I'm Aelin. So that was a really cool moment to see. It's really cool.
I am Aelin Galathinius, and I will not be
afraid.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that line in there?
Yes, and I'm not afraid. And then at the end as well, she says, there once was a princess.
Yeah.
Like that line. There was like all of the good quotes are in Heir of Fire, which I understand why this is everyone's favorite. I just think that maybe we did not need some perspective from other characters.
Yeah. So we haven't touched on a lot, but Dorian is having this whole side plot. I think he's learning in his magic, which is cool. He's also dating the maid, Sriracha, I think is how you say her name.
Yeah.
I didn't care about this relationship.
I didn't either. I knew it wasn't gonna last. At this
point, I was like, no, someone's better is gonna come along for you, Dorian. Like, you didn't bag Aelin. You're gonna have to, like, you're not bagging the maid. Like, she's not end all be all for you. And so when she, like, dies at the end because, like, the king is unhappy or whatever, I didn't fucking care. I was just glad that it finally got Kale off his ass.
Yeah, yeah, it really. Dude, when that bitch got beheaded, I was like, oh shit. Like, well, now what's Dorian gonna have his attention to? Because this whole book, Dorian's been busy with her.
Yeah.
And then I think I put down, I went to go to my quotes to read off my Goodreads quotes, but I literally, what did I put?
You put, beheads that one bitch. Dorian big mad at daddy and gets put in his magic dog collar.
The way they described the collar, I'm like, okay, you are now a dog. Now
he gets possessed. He's possessed by a little Valg demon.
Yeah, so that is going to be really interesting to read. I did find that one quote. I just think, I don't know, I think this is my favorite.
Yeah.
Dorian, oh my god, rip. Rest in peace, brother. Rowan, the late at night. And he says, it's 2 points. He goes, number one, blah, 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 I forget it. The second one is what is important. Second, whatever we are, whatever this is, I'm still figuring it out too. So if I'm going to give you the space you deserve to sort yourself out, then you can damn well give it to me.
Yeah.
The way I was at 2 a.m. scrolling on my Kindle, freaking the fuck out. Like, I was like, yes.
So sassy.
And then, so that was at 60%, but then 15% more into the book. So he goes, so I'm staying because you are needed, because I will follow you to whatever end. Like, okay, that did not last long for them to sort their shit out.
Yeah.
Because literally a couple chapters later, they're like, we're together. But yeah, one of the last lines of Aelin's perspective is, she was Aelin Ashavira Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. So that is cry-worthy, amazing. But yeah, so back to Dorian and Kale. And Aiden, we find out, like, Aiden, I understand, we get more backstory on her parents. We know she was in the bed while they were brutally murdered. She's there.
Such a tragic backstory.
We get a little backstory of when Dorian came to the castle and he saw Aelin as they were kids. But we meet Aiden. This whole book, by the way, he's just kind of forgettable because I do not care. But anyways, he's her cousin. But he is like so devoted to Aelin. like
Yeah.
so devoted. You see that like pride that the people from Terrasen have for Terrasen, and so
Mhm.
he's the one that's kind of like, no, Aelin, don't like fuck with her. Like that's my cousin. And so
Yeah.
to some points he would not shut up about Aelin. I'm like, do you have a crush on her? Like that's kind of weird. Like you guys are cousins. Like to that point that he is so devoted to her. So oh no, don't make those eyes at me. You cannot have sex with your cousin. That's impossible. But let's just say at this point, when I'm reading from his perspective, I'm like, dude, you got the hots for her or something because that's your cousin, if I'm not mistaken, and that's weird. But anyways,
Okay, but Rowan and Aelin are also cousins.
No, they're not. Not in my head.
They are. Yes, they are. They both call
distant.
Maeve Aunt Maeve.
Yeah,
Literally, the only reason that Maeve doesn't force Rowan to sleep with her is because they're like, that's her nephew. That's her.
There's a degree of separation, and that,
there's
my
a bigger
friend,
degree
is like
of separation.
300 years. 300 years, whereas Aiden and Aelin are like close. But you know what?
They did not need to be related. Like Rowan and Aelin, there was no plot reason that Sarah J. Maas had to make them cousins and bring it up in the book when they're like, you know, whatever. But she sure does. She sure does put it in.
So my predictions are, I don't think Aiden will die, obviously. I think Aelin will come. We end this book where the boys, like Kale and stuff, are going back for him. So, I don't know. I feel like Aelin's going to show up and barely get away. And they're all going to be united again. We didn't talk about Manon a lot, but same thing. I think that there's not much to get into at this point with her character. I do think that she works for the king now. And she is
kind of is playing the like villain arc. Like she's kind of on that like B plot villain thing right now.
100%. I think she's gonna get wrapped into the story again. Maybe the Wyvern, aka dragons, go to attack like Aelin's crew, and she's like, "Wait, what? Huh?" Like, because Manon has this second outlook. Like her grandma sucks, so we need to kill grandma. She needs to take the Blackbeak like throne or whatever, and like let's call it a day. So that's but she can use, as Selena did or Aelin did, and as Kale can do, kinda, not really anymore, is like she works for the king, so she can use that to her like benefit and helping them. So that is all I have to say. I have the hots for Rowan. I'm really excited to read Queen of Shadows. Like I'm very, very
Queen
excited.
of Shadows is by far the best book in the series. Not that you shouldn't read the other ones, because it's such a satisfying, like you gotta get to the end, but Queen of Shadows has literal crack in it. It's so fucking good.
I'm so excited.
I think I read Queen of Shadows in like 3 days. I'm not even fucking kidding. I could not put that book down. It's so good. And then you have the tandem read afterwards with Empire Storms and Power of Dawn, which is insane, and it is a beast of its own nature, and we will put out information when Paiton gets there how to do the tandem read, so that way you can be a little guided through it. And then you finish the series off with Kingdom of Ash, the big bad war. I'm so excited for you to get to it. I think individually the books, I was not always obsessed with each individual book. However, the series as a whole, and looking back on it, it's one of my favorite series that I've ever read. Like, I think there's other, like, the Red Queen books, I loved the individual books, and I loved reading those individual books. But the series as a whole, looking back, I'm like, okay, yeah, like, that, it feels very, like, run-of-the-mill as a whole. Whereas this as a whole, I'm like, oh, it's so good. So good. So.
So
excited to continue.
I'm very excited. And if you're reading along with me, let's do this. All right, but that's all we have time for today. Thanks for sticking to the end. As always, let me know where you're at. No spoilers, please. And yeah, please subscribe, like, comment.
Yes.
We have a lot of hopefully book reviews coming up soon. We're reading a very popular one, so look out for that.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy reading.